this forum. We have a challenge. The challenge for us is to maintain the attention after so many fruitful exchanges. Every single panel has mentioned at least the importance of media ownership transparency, which is our issue. Of course, as journalists, we always expect from those in power to be fully transparent. But we should admit that media outlets are not always fully transparent. A few years ago, the European Federation of Journalists, which is my organization and which is the largest journalist organization in Europe, participated to a survey. It was a survey on transparency of broadcast media in 20 countries, 20 European countries. And the outcome was that in only 9 of 20 countries can the public find out who the real owners of the broadcast media are. Like most of you, I believe, I think that citizens have the right to know. It's a democratic challenge. Media are strongly involved in the creation of mindsets. Media has an influence on what people think. And that's why we need full transparency on who really owns the media. It's necessary in any democracy to know who are the people that tell us what to know and what to think. This will allow us as citizens to address the problem of media concentration and lack of media pluralism, but also to prevent conflict of interest, abuses of media power, and corruption. Now, let's discuss this important issue with our panelists. I'm pleased to introduce them. Sandra Basic-Krvatin is a professor at the University of Primorska in Slovenia. She's a researcher for the Center for Media Policy at Peace Institute in Ljubljana. She's also a media and human rights activist. Katerina Sinadinovska is a journalist and an editor for Capital Media Group in Macedonia. She's also here as the president of the managing board of the Council of Media Ethics in Macedonia. Zeljko Ivanovic is the CEO of Vijesti Daily in Podgorica, Montenegro. Vesar Ligmeta is the editor-in-chief of Reporter.el, which is the online news portal of Birn in Albania. I'll ask them to deliver a short introductory statement, and then we'll have a discussion together on the main issues we are discussing. Let's start maybe with Katerina. So your initial statement regarding media transparency, media ownership transparency, and maybe with one simple question: is it possible, media ownership transparency? Do you believe it's possible?
Thank you, Ricardo. Good afternoon to everyone. I know you're probably tired at the end of the day and the conference, so I try not to be extended in my speech. Is it possible? No, I think very hard. That's the real answer, especially very hard in Balkans, in fragile democracies, and in these types of societies. In modern democracies, the transparent ownership usually is some kind of guarantee for good and quality media product. So that's the logic is that the one who is making news is proud with what he is doing, and he wants to show the citizens, to show the public who is behind the media. Because on that way he is building his personal rating. In Macedonia, especially in the media field, this is not the case. Here practice shows that transparency just like a criteria. It's usually not sufficient condition for a good journalism to be provided. So media usually can be transparent in this field. They can show openly who is behind them, but it doesn't guarantee that they will follow professional standards and they will lead editorial policy which is based on professionalism. The problem first arises from the definition of ownership. Who owns the media, who owns it on the paper, and who owns it in reality. The question is whether the one who seemed like an owner is really the owner, and the one who is making transparent and honest policy and market logic in his practicing, or he's just an owner, just a pro form owner, and in the reality, the real owner is actually the one who is financing the media. And this is important to distinguish, especially in Macedonia. For example, 5 years ago, it was allowed for politicians in our country to own a media. So we had a situation, we had examples when media owners were members of the parliament, they were leaders of political parties, and so on. So we tried to somehow to solve this problem, and there was a new law which forbids for this kind of connection. So to the politicians and media owners, we cut this connection. It was not allowed for a politician to own a media. But we didn't solve anything. Why? Because, very simple, they just transferred the ownership to close friends of them or even to their family members. So actually, and basically, it was even harder to follow who is really behind the media. So here we come to the question, is the owner actually the one who is providing finance? Usually it is. And in Macedonia, for 1 decade, the government was the main actor who was providing financing with adverts, spending millions of euros in the media who were close to them. And that's how they were influencing in the media. A characteristic of all that media who were dependent on public money is that the products that they were making, the articles, were completely the same. They had even same titles, same quoting, same sources, same content that they were producing. So it was very simple to understand that all this information was spreading from very same center of power. It can usually be some business center of power, of political center of power, or the government itself. And here I would like to say that the main concern is that this has nothing in common with public interest and with professional journalism, with respecting standards of professional journalism. Here, it also leads to further deviance of the media business and media sector. And by ignoring the public interest, the constitutionally guaranteed right of the citizens to be informed, this is breaking, actually, this kind of journalism is leading to manipulation and to the citizens who are not informed, whose right is not respected, and the role of journalism. I'm always saying that this is, when we are talking about fake news these days, like a very popular term, I'm saying that we should talk about fake journalism and fake media as well. This link between the politics, business, and the media in Macedonia is actually the real problem, because the media owners in our country, I would say the typical media owner is a businessman for whom the media is not the primary business. So they usually have other companies, they are connected with completely different type of businesses, and they are misusing the media to spread propaganda, to work for some political center, some political party, usually the one who is ruling, or they're just misusing the media to end up in some business fights and to provoke unloyal competition. And if there is no really great political willingness to solve this problem, I will have to answer to the question that it's not possible to talk about transparent ownership, because you can just respect the form or the law, But in the reality and in fact, you can just find some way how to abuse this situation. And that's why you have to have really strong political willingness to solve this problem. In this era of mass media and penetrating of the internet media, it's even more difficult because we have a situation when every day there are new and new web portals rising all the time, they're showing up. It's really hard to follow who is behind them because they're not transparent, they're giving wrong addresses, they're just not respecting basic criteria, for example, not having an impressum, who is behind, who is in the newsroom, who are the people working for that media, where are they registered, are they a company or not, and so on. And we are, as a media council, we are trying to find some kind of solution with this, having in mind that also you have to respect the freedom of speech, not to interfere with this right. So, for example, in the previous decade, when we were really fighting very strong pressure from the government in the media sector, the internet space was the only, how can I say, the only field of liberty where critical content was allowed to be published. So that's why we really do not need some laws for these media portals, but we do need stronger self-regulation. I remember yesterday on one of the panel, there was a question for Albania, is it possible for a self-regulation, something like similar to this question, and the answer was no. I think in Macedonia it's a different story. We as a council, we do have a good path and good reputation in the society. We have all the media, the biggest and most influential media in our council, but it's still a very new initiative. And having in mind that we are faced with this type of challenges, we have to work much harder to try somehow to improve the transparency as itself. And especially in the field of transparency of the media, we have another initiative. When 1 month ago, we published 4 criteria as a council for all the media who are supposed to be our members, that they have to respect. One of the criteria is transparent media ownership. So we will see how this initiative will develop in our country, and maybe I can answer to this question more specifically next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Katerina. Very frank and straight statement. It's difficult from your point of view to impose transparency on media ownership, but as you said, it's maybe possible to have an impact through self-regulation and other proposals. Sandra, as an academic, what's your view on this? Do you share the same views regarding the difficulty to impose transparency on media ownership?
Thank you, Ricardo. Just to stay focused, and because I know that I'm a nightmare for translators, so I will try to read it a little bit slower than usual. So at the beginning, I will focus my reflection on staying inside the box. The question in the title of the panel supposes that ownership transparency is in reality impossible. Why is this the case? Media companies are not enterprises like others that supply products or services. Their products influence the formation of public opinion in the society. They influence the understanding of events. They determine the context of interpretation, and most importantly, they enable the public to shape its own opinion on key issues. It might not be important who owns a car company, but I do believe that knowing about the ownership of the most significant opinion shapers is very important. Concerning the second question posed by the title of the panel, the relevance of transparency of ownership and functioning of media companies becomes clear. Corruption, especially the systemic corruption, like Lawrence Lessig called it, flourishes in context with the dominant culture of secret alliances, hidden ownership, unknown sources of financing, and influence of lobbying. It is a culture of trade with influence bypassing public interest and in most cases going directly against it. For most of the countries of origin of the participant in this conference, this is the prevailing culture. It's something that Serge Lamy from Le Monde Diplomatique defines as incestuous relationship between politics and the media. The access to information on who are our informants, their ownership, and the process of production of information is at best scarce and cursory. Since the 90s and the process of privatization, it became clear that the state has no capacity or interest to ensure the transparency of the process that shaped new media systems. The processes of media privatization have been non-transparent. The owners became, in many cases, individuals connected to political elites or politicians by themselves, while media ownership has served as a cover for investments in other companies. The state have passed legislation that formally required transparency of media companies, but they have never given power to regulators to actually enforce the overview. Foreign companies that have entered in the ownership structures of local media have also not brought with them business practices characteristic for their countries of origin. Instead, they have quickly adopted to the non-transparent environment which favored maintaining good relationship with those on power. The result? Publicly denounced ownership covered up actual secret ownership. Investors come from countries, some of them in European Union, Cyprus, Luxembourg, or Liechtenstein, where actual secret ownership, where they only had registered postal boxes while taking advantage of the secrecy of financial transactions. Reselling of ownership shares was done through secret bargains where unknown companies with minimum amount of capital bought underpriced media houses. In this moment, the lack of transparency in media ownership is the least of our problems. The cards have been dealt under the table and according to the rules known only to those participating in the purchase and selling. The biggest losers of these deals are suffered by journalists, those employed in the media sector, and the citizens. If I continue the discussion now, trying to think outside the box, I can state that the bigger danger, in a political sense, is another form of complete non-transparency, which is brought to us by the functioning of the algorithms that determine the menu of information choice on the internet and are owned by large, at least in Europe, American corporations such as Google, Facebook, and Twitter. If I were to enter in my browser a generic word such as democracy, the first source, the first hit that would appear is the web page of a newspaper bearing the same name that, however, that do not respect any democratic rules or journalistic rules in society. If I enter the word migrants, the first 10 hits would be linked to media coverage promoting hate speech, fear, and discrimination against minorities. Knowing that for a growing number of people, the internet and internet media is becoming the primary source of information, it should be clear to us that we have a problem, a big problem. How does the algorithm work in this case? The owners of the companies would like us to believe that it is based on the number of clicks. The more clicks, more media attention, the more internet site reaches the top of the sources. In the cases I mentioned, we are dealing with media. They have a very limited, if not minimum, reach. I myself do not consult these media, nor have I ever willingly searched, I promise, for information on their websites. Apparently, the browser either believes that this information is relevant to me, or it believes that this is what should I read and should see if I want to be informed. The media that I am mentioning are receiving extensive financial support from a Hungarian owner, closely tied to the president of the country and his political party. When my email account was robot trolling from different hate speech messages, I contacted the police. They found out, that's what they told me, that their server is not in Europe, that it's in the US, where large sums of resources are being misused for manipulation with algorithm function, especially in my country. Maybe the ownership of traditional analog local media is hidden. However, with a little help from investigative journalists, we can find out who the owners are. In the case of internet megacorporation, we know exactly who their owners are, but we know nothing about how their companies are influencing and shaping the public discourse. Struggle against corruption, a specific kind of corruption that is manipulating our personal data, Cambridge Analytica scandal, and sell it as a commodity to different politically motivated groups, as in the case on Facebook, is a case struggle of this moment. Unfortunately, nor nation state, nor the European Union, and I unfortunately have to say to my dear colleague Ognjev Zlatan, who was quoting Federica Mogherini quotes, the European Union have no mechanisms to stifle the spreading of the lies, profound lies, hate speech, disinformation, manipulation, etc. As we talk of fake news and fake media, we should also talk about fake politics and fake politicians. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. A strong statement again. Thank you for raising the issue of the lack of transparency of online platforms and the algorithms. Zelko, Sandra just told us that there is a kind of culture of secrecy from the publishers, publishers. So why is it so difficult for some media owners, some of them, to be transparent on ownership?
Is there some? Oh, okay. Yes, I am fucking publisher. And you have seen a few minutes ago how it's difficult to be publisher with this guy from Axel Springer. Even Axel Springer is huge and maybe the biggest publisher in Europe. And it is not so easy every time and everywhere to represent publisher. But first of all, I would like to say some general things for me, keywords for all these topics which is related to media, which was mentioned during these 2 days, from freedom of speech, business, fake news, ownership structure is responsibility. And when I say responsibility, I don't think just about responsibility on journalist level, owners level. I speak about responsibility of all players who are involved in this issue. And first of all, the biggest responsibility which determine all this situation in media field in some country is political, of course, political elite. If you have responsible political elite, you will have not problem with fake news, you will not have problem with propaganda, you will have professional and open media, and they will play a role which they should play in every democratic society. Many years ago, I think in 1996 or 7, when started this famous story about transparency in ownership structure, when was very famous story about Berlusconi case in Italy, in some similar conference, I heard from people from UNESCO who organized that conference that a year ago the country on this Reporter Without Borders or some similar organization ranking of democracy-related freedom of speech, #1 country was Finland. Finland was a country where all professional standards was on the highest level. In that year, I think the same situation is now, 92 or 93% of ownership of media in Finland was in the hands of one family. And they have been owner last 95 or some 100 years. And, but that was for me a very good example that, this story about transparency in ownership structure in that way, which we have seen during these 15, 20 years, will not work in some optimal level and will not produce any serious results. And after all my personal experience with different type of owners and partners in ownership structure, especially foreigners, I could say that European value or rule about transparency and ownership structure means nothing. Because in meantime, all these bad guys in region or around Europe and world who don't have responsibility about media role and who are doing everything to destroy media role and to destroy credibility of media, they found and they developed different type of formulas how they will avoid transparency and how will formally fulfill in European request this request about ownership structure. What means that they avoid even that everybody knows that, for example, in Montenegro, president of country is owner of 4 or 5 media, real owner, and who decide about editor-in-chief and about editorial policy. Of course, if you are going in this way to prove that with the ownership structure, he doesn't exist anywhere. You have what is cynical. He has owner who is Greek guy, who doesn't speak our language, what means he doesn't understand what his so-called his media publish every day or report every day. What means he is just front man and he is just mask for real. And how, if you are going in this way, how you will prove or how you will punish or how some regulator will react or will protect some society and some media market. That means without responsibility in politics, that situation produce non-responsibility in ownership structure, non-responsibility after that in editorial policy, and you have after that propaganda media, what is unfortunately situation in these countries in Southeast Europe now. You have even in some EU members country which suffer with similar things. But after, to be short and to maybe allow some question, my experience, because we had from 2002, we have experience with partners. First, we started our media like in 90s, usually that happen in all these countries, like group of journalists and editors, and with grants which we got from donors. But we were lucky because in that time when we started, appeared MDIF. You already have seen a representative of MDIF who explained story about MDIF, who from first day learned us that if we are based our operation just on donor side and depend of donors, we will disappear one day when donors disappear. And unfortunately, after this last 15 years after Milosevic, this democracy which arrived in all these countries, majority of that media disappeared, or they died, or they got new owners who don't care about their mission, their role, and about this kind of responsibility and watchdog journalism. Because that I could say from my experience that MDIF is really the best project which came from international level related to media, because they teach us how we can manage business without donation. Second, on 2002, we started in 1997. In 2002, we have seen that political elite doesn't want to accept independent media, and they try already in that time they try to destroy us. They started with alternative daily newspaper, they cut advertising and something like that, and we looked for foreigner investors. Of course, we had all time until today we have a lot of these businessmen, tycoons close to government who offer us millions to sell our shares them, but we keep our mission and our idea, and we didn't want to deal anything with that type of people and that guys, and we looked for international publishing company, and we found WATS, which was in that time serious and really big organization, but after 4 years very good cooperation and protection of our role, they finished in marriage with our prime minister, and finally after that case in Montenegro, in smallest country like Montenegro is, they completely lost their credibility, and after that they finished their role in this region. And Katarina knows what happened in Macedonia. They here developed 3 daily newspaper. All that media today doesn't exist, and even people who was from what side involved in that story, now they are in prosecutor some trials and investigation. Afterwards, after we finish with WATS, thanks to MDIF, because we refuse, like local co-owners, refuse to take money from them for our shares. MDIF was somebody who played, because we didn't have money to buy their shares. MDIF bought their shares, and from that time MDIF is our biggest shareholder. And in 2009 we got Styria, and we are happy this last how many 10 years we are happy with that cooperation, and I could say that it is something what is really unique, even not just for our region, I think for much wider territory. And something what I could say from journalist position, because I started 30 years ago as journalist, I am proud that we have editorial team, editor-in-chief, collegium journalists who are completely independent of all owners, local, international, FDIF, Styria, me. That means if I call my editor-in-chief and say, don't write today about Gruevski case like somebody called Blitz in Belgrade, he will tell me fuck off. And I am proud, because that even that I would never do it and I would never call it, but I am proud that he is completely belonging to his role, and he knows what is his role and what is his responsibility. And I think that it is for some small country where everybody know each other, and when everything people finish in some friendship or relationship that was so hard to build something what is really independent. And because that I lost a lot of not just politicians, I don't care for them, but I lost many friends, cousins, relatives, who was not happy because one day in so-called my newspaper appeared her name or his name in some corruption case or some negative stories. But it is our destiny and it is our role, and we are happy that we still exist and we still can survive, even that in the last 10 years we passed 25th physical attack and 25th to 5. And we lost millions money because in the last 10 years, government, public companies, any private companies who are controlled by government didn't spend any euro in our advertising, even that we are the biggest and most popular and most influential media in Montenegro. And just to compare, 2 years ago in Belgrade case, when daily newspaper Kurir tried to do something similar in Serbia, like to cancel their relationship with President Vučić and try to be independent newspaper and criticize him. After 2 months, not 10 years, they was almost in bankruptcy. And they go back to Vučić cabinet, kiss him I don't want to say where, but they again start to be propagandists for him, and now they are still alive, they are happy, but they are propaganda watch. And because that it is question which we already mentioned, unfortunately Serbia today is in worst situation in all last 30 years, even much worse than in that horrible Milosevic time. Thank you.
Thank you, Zelko. I should say that as a journalist representative, I like that kind of fucking publisher. Thank you. Zelko insisted, Besar, on the need to feel responsible. Politicians should feel responsible, but I think that journalists should feel responsible as well. And from what I understood from the former panel discussions, the media landscape is not really transparent in Albania. Are journalists investigating this issue in Albania?
Well, if you talk about transparency, who owns the media in Albania, everybody knows who owns the media. I don't think there isn't any surprises in that, apart from one or two proxy cases and one offshore company. We normally know who the media owners are, but transparency in media ownership is a much bigger concept that rather who owns specifically one media or one outlet or a group of outlets. It has to do a lot with pluralism of the media market. It has a lot to do with how much of this media market audience is concentrated in the hands of a few people. It has to do a lot with the related businesses of those few people who control the audiences and to those few people who actually control the revenues of the media market. So if there is no actual competition in the media market, is that market transparent? I mean, what does it mean if we know that two people control all media outlets in the country or control 80% of the audiences? So we arrived to this situation that when we talk about the media in the region and speaking after the esteemed colleagues, I got this feeling of deja vu because I was a few weeks ago in Brussels and I was trying to make a few points about the media situation in Albania, and the gentleman at the European Commission went on to say, but in Serbia it's worse. Stop complaining. I was like, yeah, but I can push some points in terms about media concentration. We've done the study with Reporters Without Borders as Bern. We did it both in Serbia and Albania, and in Albania we had at least out of 12 indicators in this media ownership monitor study, 9 of them turned out to be in Albania that concentration was very high, and 3 of them was medium. And indicators in Serbia, there was only 3 indicators out of 12 that were high in terms of media concentration. And then the gentleman said, like, yeah, but there is countries in the EU, I know the situation is worse. So if we're fighting this, who's worse, and trying to compete with our misery, I don't think we're getting very far. I think the question we should be asking ourselves is what do we do about it? As journalists, but also as a community of workers of media outlets. The one thing that I think journalists or investigative journalists have done a good job is to expose who are these proxy owners of media. But also the work, which is a little bit more difficult and complex, but also journalists in the region have done a good job, is to expose the related interests of these media owners. Media owners, for example, in Albania have related interests in gambling, in private higher education, in banking, and in the construction sector, which is very lucrative. When the new government came in Tirana, like Edi Rama's new government, socialist government, in 2013, the first order of business was to freeze building permits for a year. And it doesn't take a genius to figure out who were the only people in town who got a building permit. The main media owners in the country, the owners of the main TV stations. So you have basically 3 people in the country who are a bit more equal than everybody else. And just because they own the media outlets, because they control 80% of the audience, of the TV audience, they control 90% of the revenues in the market, which is a small market, and there is very little competition. Why do they control it? We should be asking ourselves. It's very simple. It's because they occupied illegally the frequencies, the digital frequencies for more than a decade. When they actually went to pass this digitalization law, and the digitalization process was about to happen, they awarded them most of the licenses because they were already in the market. And the government even decided to give them 5 million euros because of this painful occupation for a decade of these licenses, and they made millions and millions out of it. And for the transition from, let's say, analog to digital. And then you understand there is little space for anybody else. The myth in the country for such a long time has been that Albania's market, you have thousands of outlets, and there is, it may be that they're biased politically, but you have many voices. The truth is that there might be, many people trying to speak out, but the ones that are being heard are only two very powerful media owners. And that's the same situation that you can find also in the print market. When there is a situation where you have basically a lack of competition, and this lack of competition existed before, not because the legal framework wasn't there. Before the legal framework, basically the law on audiovisual media in Albania mandated that no owner should own more than 40% of a certain national TV broadcaster. What happened at the time is all the owners started placing, cousins, wives that they had married, or, other family members. So they had the ownership de facto, but not ownership de jure, which everybody at the same time again knew. After when this digitalization law was about to be passed in Albania, this became a problem because there were new licenses to be awarded, the new benefits to be awarded to basically to the main media owners in the country. The digital licenses were there to be forever. So this occupation and concentration in the media market, which existed illegally, was about to be legalized. And that was the idea of the law. Let's legalize the concentration that already exists. That's why they had a beauty contest in the tender form. The idea was that the beauty contest is a form of tendering a public good, basically, when you select a few companies to participate. It's not open to everybody. So there were no international, let's say, or let's say other entrepreneurs that could enter and bid for these licenses. They were the ones that were existed in the market already, or the ones who had invested in digital platforms already, but they had done so by occupying public space, yes, historical channels. And what happened is that the licenses were divided between two companies. We all know them, Top Channel and TV Klan. Public broadcaster was burdened with, all the cost of transitioning also with also problematic tender, and then they were to host everybody else that was in the market. So this oligopoly in the market was not only existent for a long time, which stifled, let's say, media freedom in Albania. When in 2003, I think Albania ranked in Reporters Without Borders something 30th as a country worldwide. Now we're somewhere in 87 as ranking in terms of media freedom. So you saw a deterioration in this period as concentration in the market increased. And also what happened is, as a side effect of this deterioration, as we saw this growing lack of competition to push this, what were companies were a little bit more vibrant a decade ago. The lack of competition put them not to seek standards of journalism, because once you basically had your space in the media market guaranteed, your propensity to have quality journalism, to convince the public and to serve the public even for your own interest, not only for theirs, diminishes. So they stop spending in terms of quality reporting. They stop spending or supporting journalists who were entrepreneurial or investigative journalism, and they were pushed more into the arms of politicians. This kind of situation created a very close relationship between politicians and, as I think your term kind of exemplifies it much better. This kind of relation put a lot of journalists into this self-censorship mode. The brightest people don't go anymore into journalism as a practice. The ones that were bright already in the practice either go into politics or either went into PR or either moved out of the country because they couldn't bear it anymore. So they sought other venues and opportunities. The ones that remained lowered their standard, and this sense of self-censorship became worse. So the transparency of media ownership may be there. They're very transparent who owns the media in the country, but the financing of the media per se is not transparent. Where the money is coming from? Is the money coming from the related businesses of these media owners, or is it coming from the media per se? Is it coming because they produce, let's say, a quality service, or is it coming because basically they control the market because the market was divided by the political parties in the licensing process? So if there is a lack of competition, there is no motive for them to improve. If there is a lack of competition, even we're having new companies entering the market now, like we have an affiliate of CNN and an affiliate of Euronews. How there will be space for them when most of the licenses are already awarded? Will they be able to compete in this already small market when you have such a position as an oligopoly? So will they become, let's say, another satellite outlet, or they will contribute to greater media freedom? So having a large number of outlets doesn't really guarantee you competition.
It's contrary completely.
So this is a question that we should be answering ourselves. Imagine in this situation where journalists find themselves. I mean, they're like the weakest link of this like big chain between political parties, oligarchs, media owners, and let's say business interests. So I think my opinion has always been we should do more in this situation, apart from changing the legal framework so there is more competition in the market. In Albania, there were, when this licensing was awarded, we tried, and everybody tried actually to support this framework, Article 63, which reduced ownership, at least of a national broadcaster, to 40% to a single owner. But what happened at the time is that politicians pushed for it, and when they couldn't push it through parliament, the media owners basically went and, we would say, bought now, but now maybe it's not the correct term, but since we have this vetting process and half the Constitutional Court has turned out framework and licensing, this oligopoly will exist. What can we do in this situation if we want more freedom? I think we need to we go to the weakest link and try to support the individual. We try to support the journalist to actually produce, because to produce stories, to produce investigative reporting, to have an outlet to publish, just for the reason because in this day and age it is a little bit more simple to publish, but very difficult to publish quality reporting.
What is the influence of that articles after the stories? If you don't have mainstream media where you will publish them?
Oh, understandably, the influence is not the same, but what kind of choice do we have? I mean, that's the only weapon we have right now. I mean, it's definitely that we are outnumbered, but I think independent journalists have a role to play to keep, I think, the professionalism in the market. We have a role to play in terms of providing training, so where the media situation, the larger commercial outlets go into a competitive mood, when there is like the legal framework that is in existence, where the rights of journalists are respected in terms of labor code and everything else, at least the practice of journalism will be there. The know-how, the knowledge will be there. So we're somehow in a survival mood. We're not in flourishing or anything. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. We are there just to keep the good, let's say, what we've built in this last 2 decades through training or anything like that, and good people with, I think, their heart in the right place going into the profession, because we see more young people go into the journalism departments and all they want to do is become public relations officials, or they want to become this, we call them analysts for some reason, I don't know, but like TV stars, TV personalities, which to them it's like we want to become rich. And I remember my first lesson I got into J school, in the first class that I had about, I think it was not information gathering, but writing and reporting, first thing I was told was like, if you go into this profession, you're not going to become rich. It's going to be hard. You're going to become poor. But I was 19 years old, and I thought, how cool is that? Poor, hard, and sticking it to everybody else. So that changes with time. It's not that as easy that you think as when you're 19. But I think still you need people in the profession which are, go into it because they're idealistic, which they're smart, which can contribute to society, not only and push this new frontiers of journalism, because things that were done 10 years ago, it's a profession that is always changing. Things that were done 10 years ago aren't being done anymore. There's this digitalization process. Reporters are expected to do more. You have to film with your camera. You have to, edit with your iPhone now. So there is a lot of things that are changing. And in terms of what is not changing is the media concentration and these oligarchs controlling the media in the region and in Albania per se. So I really hope that this will be a situation that at least we can keep what is already exists in there, but hopes that things will change dramatically in the near future if let's say, the market situation doesn't improve, I think are quite dim.
Thank you, Besser, for bringing some new elements for our understanding. So the importance of the competition framework, the need to support what you called the weakest link, so the journalist on the ground, and the need to follow the money. It's not the first time we heard such a statement. I will give the floor immediately to the audience, but I will submit maybe an initial and straight question. Yesterday, Albanian journalist Claudiana Lalla said that it's very clear for her that organized crime is funding some news portals in Albania. I also discussed the issue with a Macedonian colleague yesterday, and he told me that many news outlets in the region are just a kind of money laundering machine. Do you agree with those statements? And as Besser said, we should also look for solutions. How can we tackle such a phenomenon? It's an open question.
I think that it's really somehow it's really sad to hear all these presentations, because more or less we're really sharing completely the same problems, and it's not getting better. I agree. We're not flourishing. We're really in a survival mode. And talking about this money laundering, I can agree with Željko, and with also in Slovenia. It's actually with Slovenia much more, because it's the same situation. We also have the Hungarian Prime Minister Orban, who is entering into the market, buying 10, 12 portals in Macedonia, investing in the media. So, for example, now we have all of them actually. If you open them, you can find an advert. I was looking this morning. Actually, I was shocked. You can see an advert for some olive oil company, and when you're clicking on that advert, it leads you to Hungarian website, and it's fully on Hungarian language, so you don't even understand what it is about. And it's so suspicious in some way. So I think that the presence of this kind of international connection, and the question is why somebody from abroad will be interested to invest that kind of money in new market in a country that he has nothing to do with it. And it's really I think it's with this internet era, it's even more easy to penetrate into the market and to make that influence. So now we are not only threatened by our own domestic elites, but also with their connection and their friends, their business friends from abroad, their colleagues, prime ministers from abroad. as we see with this the last case when our ex-prime minister, he escaped, he chose Hungary as a country, as a escape destination. So I think that when we talk about solution, I really enjoyed in the presentation of Željko, and he said that he's very happy because he knows, he is convinced that if he calls his editor-in-chief and make a direction, you should write about this, he will be refused. And I think that it's the best thing that you can do as a media owner. But have in mind that you were a journalist once. So maybe that's the key. In Macedonia, it's the same case. The most important and the most professional media are owned by former journalists. So maybe if we help journalists to form their own media, maybe it can help, because it will be the main interest, the main business. They won't have any other business activities, any other companies. Maybe it can be some kind of solution. I'm not sure.
Just to add, I could say after this 25 years experience that the best solution is that, but not just to have local owners with journalist background, to have some combination. Even I'm not sure that even I really deeply respect what Styria did in Montenegro and in Croatia too. I am not sure that Viesti would be on that level if Styria is 100% owner. What means that mix between Styria, MDIF, like foreigner owners and local owners with journalist background is the best formula for ownership structure, and it is something what could protect independence of editorial team, policy, journalists, and everything. And just one remark to some point which Besim said, which is very good, about numbers. Numbers of media, if you want to see what is situation of media freedom and credibility of media in some country, just you should not make any deep analysis, just to check how many media there are. If there are like 10 TV stations on market, which is 10 million euro per year for all TV stations, and if there is 5 daily newspaper on market of 2 million, what is situation in Montenegro, that means that political elite destroy that market, and with, of course, intention to control all media, because if media are not sustainable financially, they are control, somebody should finance them, and they depend of that points which finance them. And in 2012, when president of the board of the biggest Danish publisher and one of the biggest and most serious and credible group in Europe, Politiken, who's Julian Posten, Jürgen Abel, when he visited Montenegro, we showed them exactly that day when he arrived, four daily newspaper. Day before was 3, that day was 4, and we said this is new daily newspaper which started today. This is free of charge, like free. And he said, okay, there is big train station in Podgorica, in Montenegro, no one. There is bus station, no, bus transport doesn't exist, just taxi. There is metro, no, but how they can deliver that? and who finance that? What means they, and next 7 months, every day, that group which still exists around this Greek investor and tycoon, they still exist. 7 months they deliver through supermarkets, what means every day when some ordinary people buy something, milk or sugar in supermarket, without to ask them, they put them this daily newspaper. And 7 months they publish 20,000 copies, what is highest circulation in the time in Montenegro, any print media, and 20,000 copies they deliver 7 months to persuade them that they should buy that newspaper, not Viesti. And after 7 months they lost, but they continue with 2,000, with 3,000 copies, but of course they damage us, and they took from us some advertiser, even some readers, because something that when you deliver free of charge is much cheaper than 70 cents every day.
Okay, I just wanted to make comment about the organized crime. I think we should, first of all, we should forget this image of the criminals from Godfather and Michael Corleone. I mean, organized crime today is in politics. And do not forget that in Malta, Daphne was working on the case which involved the top politician in Maltese society. That Malta, as a member of the European Union, at the same time when the Europe is becoming fortress and closed for the immigrants, the Maltese government is selling gold visa for mostly Russians who are money laundering. They very suspect capital in Malta. Then Jan Kuciak was working on very concrete relationship between politicians and money laundering coming from the East. So the problem is that we have to also discuss what is going on with European Union. And you said in the previous panel, and I didn't want to react immediately, you said that you feel like you are betrayed from European Union. And I agree, but not you and Serbia as a country, but also me as a citizen of the European Union, I feel betrayed by the European policy. Because European Union doesn't have any media policy, doesn't at all. And if you now look in all this accession process and progress report and all this stuff, and if you use the same criteria, which is the European Union implying on Serbia, Macedonia, Montenegro, and so on, and if you apply this acquis communautaire to the members of the European Union, and I did it, and from 27 countries, 20 countries at this moment will not be members of the European Union if we use the same standards which European Union is using for Macedonia and the other countries. And this is a hypocrisy, and this is a problem. So instead of talking about media are closely related to democracy, and in my last lecture in European Parliament, the European Union is constantly talking about democratic deficit in the Europe, that there is no that the policy do not reflect the real issues by the people. And my question is, how deep this deficit is? Maybe we are already bankrupt and we didn't know that. Maybe we should imply some austerity measures. I don't know. But the problem is that we have to discuss what is going on with the democracy. And I think we are betrayed in these diplomatic principles which are written in the fundamental charts of the European Union. So we have in European Union countries like my country or Hungary, which are not respecting basic democratic rules. And European Union can do nothing. We as the citizens, to comply to whom? That's the problem. So I don't know, maybe for the next conference, we can organize conference in Brussels with 20 countries from the 27 countries from the European Union, and all you members from the Southeast Europe, you can be judges. You can ask questions because we share, unfortunately, we share the same problems, and unfortunately, we are generating problems from inside the European Union, also outside the European Union. And I think politicians, also those who are attacking themselves through Twitter, they work closely hand in hand together for their interest. Don't be naive. So that's my point. And also for your representation, Colonel from the NATO, I mean, you have all this knowledge for the NATO as a big institution. But at the same time, you have so many people who are attacked with the same measures, the organization and so on, and we can't do anything. So if the police in my country tell me we cannot do anything, I mean, in which country I'm living? What is that? Bantustan, and we are a member of NATO. So that's the problem. I don't know. I'm very pessimistic, And I think next year in April, after the new election in European Parliament, we will have a completely different Europe. Brexit is nothing in comparison which will happen next year, and that's the problem.
Thank you, Sandra. It was important, I think, to remind that Jan Kuciak, Daphne Caruana Galizia, and Victoria Marinova, all the three of them used to report on corruption related with politicians. Yeah, in the European Union, indeed, indeed. Bess, are some comments on this, or go on?
Well, the thing that I wanted to say about the ties between or organized crime financing media is that it wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me in the sense that a lot of other things in this country, but also in the region, are financed by organized crime. So we have criminal money in the election process. We have a lot of it, very much. So we have them in many other businesses. So it's not a surprise that they'd be financing maybe some media outlets. But I think this is kind of like losing your eyesight from the ball in a sense, because the most, let's say, connection between the main media owners and the business interests in there, the oligarchs, let's say, they're quite transparent. So yes, maybe some fringes of it which are tied to organized crime, but this is these big oligarchs who are actually shaping public opinion. It's not these few websites that may be financed by fringe groups, I would say.
Thank you. I would like to give the floor to the audience. Is there any question to our panelists? Any question? No question. You were so complete. Maybe I have a question, an additional question for you. I believe that we all agree on the need, on the necessity for democracy to have a kind of transparency or full transparency on media ownership. Now, there are several views on how to achieve this. Some say that current company law at national level is sufficient. We don't need any new law, any new regulation. We don't need new media regulators dealing with this issue of transparency. What is your view on this? Because some say it's risky to give the power to governments or to regulators. And that's maybe why, Katerina, you mentioned the self-regulatory approach. So is it really risky? Because most of the states are doing this already for broadcasting.
I would never give any government power to regulate this field.
Even on this question of media ownership?
In media ownership, there has to be a collaboration between the media, the owners of the media, the journalists and their organizations, and the government, like such. But I don't think that we should be very careful, especially in this kind of societies, because the temptation that any government can feel is really huge. And I don't believe that there is such a thing as a fully media-friendly government in the world. So you have to have a mechanism how to control what they will implement, what will they, if there is any law, it really depends on the society, the level of democracy, how big the market is, and so on. If there is any kind of law, it has to be presented from the journalist. So the idea, the law, it has to be their own idea and their own need in their own request. And even so, it has to be, again, we have to be very careful, because then you have to have in mind who is presenting journalists, what kind of journalist associations are they, because in Macedonia, now it's not like that, but a few years ago we had a situation when the ones who were the main workers for the propaganda, they were trying to make a parallel associations all the time. So they were forming a new journalist association, a new council of media ethics, and if you let them to interfere into this, it's also dangerous. I think that the self-regulation as a process is really important if it's done properly and if it's supported properly from the donors, from the journalists, from the media owners. It's very important, and we don't need government in this.
Well, the system of regulation and self-regulation that we have currently in Albania is a mixed system. I mean, if you think of the media as a public good, we have a differentiation in terms of audiovisual and print. The print media law has only one article, unfortunately, which says print is free. But the audiovisual media law does have a watchdog, which is supposedly independent, but not as independent as we'd like to believe, because most of its members, board and the executive director are selected by parliament, and parliament in Albania, although they have found somehow a bipartisan formula. Bipartisan is not always, it just leads more to partisanship and not effective control of these independent organizations. But also, I think not only these organizations in terms of government-sponsored watchdog being the Audiovisual Media Authority, or let's say the Competition Authority, which also could play an important role, need to be independent for real, not only on paper, and could play an important role in terms of upholding, the levels of transparency. But also, I think self-regulation could play an important role. So I see it also the unions, if they were stronger, they could play an important role. As the public good, should be many actors that are involved. And I think every change that is made, even for transparency's sake, should be heavily consulted, but not only with the actors, but also with the public. And this is not something that really happens when new regulation is pushed in the region. So unfortunately, normally it's done in a not transparent way. So we hope that even if there was a push for more transparency or anything that is changed, it's good to be conservative in terms of changes, because they can be manipulated. So let's hope that there is a wide agreement among the media community, at least, about the changes that will be implemented. It may take time, but this will be the most cautious, I think.
Sandra, and then we'll have a question. No? Oh, really? Okay. So the first question.
Thank you. Pierpaolo Garofalo, Italy. I would like to, during these last 2 days, I think sometimes I was thinking that we were talking too much sometimes about regulation, and we forgot another word, that is education, that according to my opinion come before the regulation. And education that start to the elementary school to the professional, and then to the professional school, and then to the regulation of our profession. The education, even I agree with our Albanian colleague, also a well-educated audience can make the difference in the market towards a good journalism against the bad journalism. But I would like to underline another point, very important to me. Regulation can be also seen as censorship. Okay? Could be. In fact, in Italy, has just started to become a censorship. Can you imagine that in Italy, the Professional Association of Journalism and the professional regulatory internal organism made during the last 3-4 years some rule, spreaded some rules according, indicating how in which manner and exactly which word you have as journalist use when you talk about migrant, about gender, about young people, blah, blah, blah. If you put together all these regulation because they are regulation, because they have the power of law. Fortunately, they are not enforced very much. But if you put one after one this rule, you couldn't edit nothing, you know. So the regulation became a censorship. Thank you.
So about the risk of over-regulation.
I mean, I agree with you, but could you explain me how you are going to educate politicians?
At the beginning
I can educate. I mean, I can also educate myself. But how you can educate them?
Yes.
And what kind of regulation? I mean, in these countries we have this enormous urge to change laws constantly, and every time when we find a problem, let's change the law. And these laws are extensive, and nobody, even those who are passing this law in the parliament, have no idea what this law means. So at the end, what we need some moral and ethical standards. Could you imagine legislation in this country saying, Article 1, don't lie. Article 2, don't steal. Article 3, respect freedom of expression. Article 4, don't kill journalists. I don't know.
Yes.
That's the problem. So this is the question of political culture. So the Brits will tell you that the grass in Britain is similar to grass here, but it's a special weather, special condition, and also 500 years of tradition. So let's work on political culture, but don't forget, all these politicians, including in your country, and so on, they don't fall from Mars. They were elected. So
even they said go to elections to beat me when you criticize him from media.
I'm just saying that the problem is that we have political elite
at the beginning
who feels like everything is possible and everything is allowed. That's the problem.
You are very right. At the beginning, I intended education to all, because also the politician, before to be a politician, is a human being. He or she was a child, and so the education in very large meaning. I use this expression. Yes, you are right. The politician we cannot make a regulation in this way. You were joking, but I mean, if you haven't any general education, also about media and information that you receive when you are young, when you will be journalist, politician, engineer, or whatever, you will not be able to deal in the good, nice way about this. Thanks.
Intervention, but you have very, very simple methods. For example, fight against tax evasion, fight against tax havens here in Europe. We have countries which are proliferating with manipulation with taxes and so on. That's the problem. And then just imagine the situation. Do you think that Mr. Gruevski is escaping Macedonia like refugees from Syria with a plastic bag and a phone? Or he is going to Hungary when he will live as a rich person with the bank account hidden somewhere in Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, and so on. That's the problem. So we also have to work on this bank secrecy and everything else. Because at the end, tax evasion is killing our social services, our pensions, our, I don't know, education and everything else. So we have to, as the citizens, fight for transparency in all public spending, not just in media. That's it.
From publishing position, it is what I could say that seems like mission impossible, how to recruit new journalists. And it is something what is problem for all region and for all media, because you should find somebody who is crazy on one side and who is educated on the other side. And I agree that really that somebody who is in this time, after all this, what happened in this region now, unfortunately in European Union countries, somebody who chooses this profession should be a little crazy and of course should be educated. Because what Besim explained, his first lesson from G school was that it is not a profession who will make you rich, and it is a profession with a lot of risk, what means you should be a little crazy to choose something like that. And it is my experience, for example, 6-7 years ago when some private university in Podgorica called me to make some lecture about media and everything around media for students of journalists. After 1 hour, our conversation, dialogue, they was very happy. Even they said they are impressed with my story, blah, blah, blah. But after that, they said that no one of them planned to go to be journalist. Or if they think what Besim said, to be some PR in some company or to be TV star to have some reality or something like that, and to work with something in the entertainment part of media or something like that. What means it is really very big question for all media, how to find crazy and educated people who will do this profession in the next 20, 30 years. And if they are crazy and if they are educated, they don't have problem with regulation. They don't have, because regulation is something what all media need. Self-regulatory body. We have one, unfortunately, this media which government control, they don't want to participate in some professional self-regulatory body, and we choose one person who is completely independent, doesn't have anything with us. She is from NGO sector, and she is recognized in the last 15 years like human rights activist, media freedom activist, and we are very happy with her to have her and to criticize our editors and journalists when they make some mistake. And we are proud to recognize mistake. We are proud to publish that we made mistake, and it is something what is part of something what I said about responsibility of media and owners, editors, and everybody. But unfortunately, when you are living in jungle where somebody who is chief and who decide what we will leave, jungle or I don't know, Scandinavian some circumstances or conditions, unfortunately you should pass big suffer to defend your position and to defend your role and to do this job in some right way.
Do you know in two words to know what happened in Italy about the young, these crazy young people we should recruit? There aren't. My daily newspaper has some new colleague. We have some news colleague, and unfortunately, I can describe them as very eager to work, of course, serious, but without any sense of criticism, and very eager to please the chief, the editor-in-chief, and blah, blah, blah. This are the picture of the new generation. Because why? Because when we were young, the politics...
I am still young.
You are still young, but me, I'm not. So like you. So just to be a little bit serious, in the past, the policy influenced the daily life of the young generation. Now, at least in Italy, in Western country, this is very, very weak position. So they grew without any sense of responsibility at political level, not with the political party, policy in the term or general term.
It is big topic.
I'm young and I can agree with this constatation. So
that's a general agreement.
Yes, I think that I can share our experience. For example, when I was studying, in my group we were 135, I think, students. And nowadays, in Macedonia and schools, you have 12, 13 people who want to study journalism. It's not enough to fulfill even one newsroom. And if we have in mind that not all of them will finish the school, so it's catastrophe. So I think that it's very important to insist on transparency in all other fields, not only in the media sector, but who will do this if we don't have journalists? So we really need this education process. I really think that we should pay attention on this because what the political elites and business elites did in the past, they destroyed the newsrooms as the main and the most important subject in the journalism. So they entered there and they fulfilled them with students or with young people who not only they are not sharing the vision of journalism, they're not brave enough, they don't have that idealistic approach to the profession, but they also, they were somehow destroyed in the process because they were learning journalism from very wrong point of view. So now we have a generation who thinks that that is journalism, to try to please the government, to please the ministers, and so on. It's a very big problem because they've been brainwashed somehow. They were seeing what their editors were doing, and they thought that, okay, this is journalism. It is not. They have to be re-educated. I don't know how to say. I think it's also really, really important. Thank you for the remark.
Okay, thank you for that question. We just have time for one more question. Brief, if you can, please. So the mic should be around. Can you please pass the mic? Thank you. A brief question, please. And introduce yourself, yes, please.
Thank you very much. I'm Nico Vitrelli from Trieste, Italy. Just to give some different perspective, I also the director of a school in science journalism. That is the oldest science communication program in Europe. It was founded 25 years ago. And every year we receive a lot of applications of people that want to become science journalists, and they want to understand what is critical thinking, and finally they have a rate of employment that is more than 90%. So I think that we also should think in an optimistic way, and I would say that when they come to us, they ask also, and they try to understand how to innovate journalism, because we try to tell them that journalism has sense to continue to exist if it keeps its social role. We try to show them that journalism is the method, not just the support. Many times I would say that all journalists is that, oh, journalism is not like when I was young because there is not more press anyway. If there is no press, there is no journalism. But I don't see so many old journalists that think, how can I improve my method? Because democracy requires new methods to be credible. And this is a serious question. I think that in our experience, it's science journalism is a niche. But as I told before, it's important because science is strictly connected to democracy. There is a strong request of innovation in journalism, which does not mean that journalism is dead. It does not mean, in my opinion, that the new generation is not interested in critical thinking. I think this is, in my opinion, a big mistake to think this way, at least for my experience. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it was not a question, but a global remark. Thank you for it. I will not try to summarize the debate because it's impossible to do it. I will close the session on this optimistic, remark, because that means that we need stronger journalism with dedicated journalists open to innovation. So thank you all. I would like to thank our panelists. Thank you, Sandra, Zelko, Besar, and Katerina. Thank you all, and I will give the floor to Oliver, Hendrik, and Barbara for the final conclusions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ricardo, and thanks everyone. I will be there, but okay. Now we are coming to the closing part. 1 minute late, but okay, it's in time still. I will leave now the floor to Henrik and Barbara. Maybe you can start and I will give the final words. But before we have the final words, I would just like to thank also everyone who was here, who was active, also those who were putting things on Twitter. I would like to thank especially the big media owner from Montenegro, because I saw that he just published today a report about the forum. Željko, thanks. And I would like to thank also to other journalists who publish something about this event or who will publish, because it's always useful to give some information about these media discussions, because this can help also to change a little the situation in your countries. I would like to thank also to those who make some pictures like this, what I found on the table. Maybe next year we can do an exhibition, what people are doing during the forum, because it's also interesting.
Very good idea, Oliver.
And I think the forum brings very interesting energy, positive energy. And for sure, before I will give at the end the last word, I would like to thank especially to our partners, to the Central European Initiative from Trieste, which is our long-year cooperation partner. We cooperate also independent from the Southeast Europe Media Forum, from the award. They were supporting in the past our media handbook, so we did have different cooperation with the Central European Initiative, and especially also to Barbara, who is really using the energy for supporting democracy, media freedom in Central and East Europe, and to the Konrad Adenauer Foundation as our partner, which is from the beginning our partner of the forum. It means the founding forum partner with SEEMO, and I think because I was here at the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung Foundation, that maybe we can start with Hendrik, and I would like just to thank also to our local SEEMO partners, Albania Media Institute, and especially to Remzi Lani, who was helping us a lot locally for organizing this event. So I would like to thank to Remzi. Is Remzi somewhere? Remzi Lani, are you here? Or I'm missing Remzi? Yes, so thanks Remzi Lani especially. And also, I would like to thank to the translators, interpreters who did the great job. It was a good, really, translation. It's always hard, so I'd like to thank you also for the job. And also to the technical staff and technical team that we had here in Tirana. I was very happy to work with you together, so for sure we will do some other conferences in the future. Thanks. And now I will leave it to the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, boss for media in Southeast Europe. So Henrik, please.
Danke. Und Sie merken gerade, dass ich wieder in eine wunderschöne deutsche Sprache wechsle. Ich warte ein bisschen, bis Sie die Kopfhörer aufgesetzt haben. Und ich sage nochmal Danke. Ich sage es gleich nochmal. Also ich bin persönlich, muss ich sagen, bin ich gerade ziemlich fertig. Das war wahnsinnig viele Informationen. Ich habe richtig viele wertvolle Erfahrungen hier gesammelt, sehr gute Diskussionen miterlebt. Es waren hervorragende Diskutanten hier vorne. Ich bin wirklich glücklich darüber, was wir für eine tolle, hervorragende Konferenz in den 1,5 Tagen hier erlebt haben und erleben durften. Was gibt es also Besseres für einen Anfang für mich? Ich habe am Anfang gesagt, gestern, ich bin erst seit 2 Monaten hier. Ich nehme jetzt von dieser Konferenz extrem viel mit und habe vieles gelernt. Und das ist eine sehr gute Grundlage für mich, für die nächsten Jahre, für unser Medienprogramm. Viele neue Ideen sind auch entstanden. Ich muss aber auch gestehen, ich bin ein bisschen irritiert. Warum? Es gibt... Pressefreiheit ist schwierig, es gibt nur wenig unabhängige Medien, die Journalisten können nicht richtig arbeiten. Ich habe hier vorne auf dem Podium bei jeglichen Diskussionen eigentlich nur wirklich kritische Geister erlebt. Das sind alles Journalisten und durchaus ja auch Medienmanager gewesen, die alle gesagt haben, Wir wissen um die Pressefreiheit, wir müssen dafür kämpfen, wir müssen viel tun, wir müssen das alles verbessern. Ich weiß nicht, wir müssen wahrscheinlich beim nächsten Mal noch ein paar andere Leute einladen, die dafür verantwortlich sind, warum es so schwierig ist in ihren Ländern hier. Und, oder wir tauschen einfach mal alle aus. Die hier vorne saßen in den letzten 1,5 Tagen, die werden jetzt alle mal Verantwortung übernehmen für die großen Medien anscheinend in ihren Ländern. Und dann habe ich überhaupt keine Bedenken, dass sie bald alle eine sehr gute Pressefreiheit auch in ihren Ländern haben. Da bin ich sehr gespannt. Und da würde ich mich drauf freuen. Aber schauen wir mal, das war jetzt eine Idee meinerseits. Ich will, bevor ich jetzt wirklich nochmal Danke sage, noch einen Hinweis geben. Wir werden uns ab dem nächsten Jahr als Medienprogramm einen neuen Fokus, einen weiteren Fokus geben. Wir wollen ein bisschen den öffentlich-rechtlichen Rundfunk in Ihren Ländern betrachten. Ich komme selber vom öffentlich-rechtlichen Rundfunk in Deutschland, habe lange Jahre für 2 öffentlich-rechtliche Rundfunksender gearbeitet. Ich weiß, dass es hier enorme Unterschiede gibt zwischen den öffentlich-rechtlichen Rundfunksendern in Deutschland oder natürlich auch der großen Muttergesellschaft BBC in England. Aber insofern ist es für mich und für uns als Medienprogramm sehr, sehr interessant, mal zu schauen, wie funktioniert der öffentlich-rechtliche Rundfunk bei Ihnen, wo hapert es hier, wie läuft die Finanzierung, wie unabhängig ist er denn eigentlich, der öffentlich-rechtliche Rundfunk, und wie geht es mit den technischen Veränderungen bei Ihnen in den Ländern zu? Ich rede von Multimedialität, ich rede aber auch von Mobile Journalism. Wir werden im nächsten Jahr eine Studie dazu erstellen und ich kann alle Interessenten von Ihnen aufrufen. Wir sind über jeden Hinweis dankbar. Kommen Sie auf uns zu. Wir freuen uns darauf, mehr zu erleben, mehr zu erfahren aus den öffentlich-rechtlichen Rundfunkanstalten Ihrer Sender. Logischerweise werden wir Sie aber auch nicht, also die anderen Medien in Ihren Ländern aus dem Fokus lassen, aber darauf werden wir im nächsten Jahr einen besonderen Schwerpunkt setzen. So, jetzt hat der Oliver schon viele Dankesworte gesagt. Ich möchte aber trotzdem auch nochmal Danke sagen an die Diskutanten, an die Moderatoren, an die gesamten Organisationsteams. Das war wirklich eine klasse Konferenz. Ich sage Danke an Barbara. Ich sage Danke an Oliver. Ich sage auch hier auch nochmal Danke an Renzi Lani, der sehr viel hier, wie ich erfahren habe, für die Organisation getan hat. Das war richtig, richtig klasse. Und natürlich, und ich sage es jetzt bewusst, weil ich jetzt hier Deutsch rede, einen großen Dank an die Dolmetscher. Ich weiß, wie schwierig dieser Job auf jeglicher Konferenz und Workshop und Seminar ist. Ich würde den Job nur ungern machen wollen. Ich kann ihn auch gar nicht, ehrlich gesagt. Aber Sie haben einen richtig tollen Job gemacht. Danke dafür. Und ansonsten kann ich jetzt nur noch sagen, ich freue mich auf die nächste Konferenz in 2019. Als ich hier angekommen bin, vorgestern und gestern, habe ich viele Kollegen gesehen und ich habe immer gedacht, das sind bestimmt jetzt Teilnehmer von der Konferenz. Die haben sich alle begrüßt. Es war so ein bisschen wie Klassentreffen. Und insofern freue ich mich in der Tat auf das nächste Jahr, wenn ich dann viele von Ihnen wiedersehe und mich dann freue auf das für mich dann das erste Klassentreffen nach dieser Konferenz in diesem Jahr. Dankeschön und Ihnen dann allen einen schönen Abend, ein gutes Wochenende und kommen Sie gut und gesund nach Hause. Danke.
Thank you. Of course, I also wish to thank the partners, especially SEEMO and CAS and all the sponsors of this event, the remarkable speakers we have in all the panels and the moderators, the participants. So I don't want to repeat. I really join what it was said by my colleagues here. As a Central European initiative, I would like to confirm that we will continue supporting these kind of activities and actions. We really invest a lot in supporting the media of the region through our programs, instruments, and funds. And since it was mentioned education, we really focus on training, opportunities, education, networking, mobility. These are really priorities for us. So with our partners, SEEMO and CAS, we will continue doing that also in the framework of the Media Forum and the award. We will launch the next call in spring, in 2019, the call for the CI SEEMO Award. So I will invite you to follow our communication tools to get all the information and to make submissions and proposals. So we expect all of you next time. I don't know, we can announce now the location of the venue of the next.
Yes, together you can do it now.
Okay, so the next media forum will be held in Zagreb, Croatia. So I think this is quite an interesting choice we made. So thank you very much.
Okay, then at the end, I will just say thanks. See you then next year, probably a lot of you in Zagreb in Croatia. Thank you.